Yeah, I'm going to talk about plutocratic governance, not just in U.S. higher ed, but in the larger political economy, because the two are connected to each other. The governance of higher education shapes the governance of our larger political economy, and vice versa. Um, and when I was talking with Maddie from Debt Collective yesterday, doing this Substack Live, she was like, so wait, what do these words mean? Plutocrats and oligarchs. And I was like, oh, great question. So I threw this in here. Plutocracy, rule by the wealthy. Oligarchy, rule by the few. And I think you can really put those words together to understand U.S. higher ed um, and society, where you're putting plutocracy and oligarchy together for rule by the wealthy few. And both in my book and in this paper that I published last year with Albina Guibadulina, who's a fantastic economic geographer who's just finishing a postdoc at Brown and is going to start at Leeds University in the Department of Economics next year. Somebody to really watch her work. She's doing amazing work, and she's one of my collaborators. She and I are also going to have an article soon on private equity's takeover of the larger U.S. economy. So we'll keep an eye out for that. But we showed in that paper, and I talk about it in my book, you have a change in who is in the billionaire class. Billionaires are both wealthier today than they used to be in the 1980s, but they're made up of different groups. They're particularly made up of folks from finance, from private equity and hedge funds, and also increasingly from tech. My book focuses more on the finance folks and why they particularly have risen in wealth and why they particularly sit on university governing boards. But my latest research, that's part of my Axis of Oligarchy project on Substack, that's also a book project, is looking at tech and finance and the relationship between the two, how they're similar, how they're different, how they complement each other. So for thinking about them today, in the context of higher ed, the way I think about this is billionaires, especially from tech, or especially from finance, and also to some extent from tech, they dominate the boards of elite schools at the top that mostly educate rich students. Then at the bottom, they also govern the bottom of the higher education system in that they created most of our predatory for-profit colleges and expanded them. They created the modern predatory for-profit college through a wave of nearly 1,000 buyouts of predatory of for-profit colleges that they then made more predatory in the 1990s, and they did that to chase the new expanded federal student loan system. And because they're hoarding resources at the top for private institutions and they're extracting public subsidies at the bottom, resources get diverted from public universities and community colleges in the middle. Also, plenty of private colleges, but public universities and community colleges enroll a far larger percent of U.S. College students than private colleges do. So that's really a public and community college story mostly. And then in politics, billionaires increasingly govern our university system, or are seeking to govern our university system through attacks on free speech, on scientific pursuit of the truth, affordability, and access through how they're acting in politics in alliance with the far right. So I'm going to tell this story through, I'm going to draw out three kind of characters of how these things work together today, kind of briefly. One is Marc Andreessen, who's a venture capital billionaire. He started the Andreessen Horowitz venture capital firm. His partner, Benjamin Horowitz, it was until recently on the board of Columbia University, also an important player in this space, but is less verbose than Marc Andreessen, so you don't get as many great words from the horse's mouth. And then you've got Mark Rowan, who is a private equity billionaire. He is the co-founder of the Apollo private equity group, one of the big 5 private equity firms, and has himself sat on the University of Pennsylvania board at times, is currently an advisor to the Wharton School, and is the self-described architect of the Compact. And then you've got Christopher Rufo, white right-wing activist that these guys have developed a relationship with. And these folks have made these kind of Orwellian false arguments to attack higher education, saying that they're seeking equal treatment in admissions, except they want special treatment for wealthy legacy students. That there's no equal treatment in admissions for those folks. They're making anti-elitist arguments, which may resonate with some of us. You know, I myself am quite a critic of our wealthiest elite private universities, but really their anti-elitism only extends to elite critics of the billionaire class. So if we're honest with ourselves, you know, people like Elizabeth Warren, or even college students who are graduating from elite colleges, you know, myself as a doctorate with a PhD from UC Berkeley, you know, I'm an elite, and they certainly feel some anti-elitism towards me, but it's just elite critics of the billionaire class. They also say they're very pro free speech. That's one of their things that they say is so important to them, and that's true except for their critics. And viewpoint diversity, which they want for unproven false ideas that serve their interest, including climate change denial in some cases. So I just had the thing where so they're making these attacks on elite universities, which why? It's a little odd to attack the same universities where they graduated, they sent their kids, they've donated millions of dollars, they've served on the boards of trustees. And the way I kind of make sense of this is that they feel threats to their wealth, their status, and to their sense of control from campus protests, from academic policy ideas to check their power and wealth, from elite graduates who bring these ideas about checking wealth and power into elite careers, and from the rising popularity of debt relief and debt-free college, particularly debt relief that they see as going to the undeserving, as opposed to them as the deserving holders of great wealth and power. And sorry, for some reason, it keeps popping out of the queue for the slides. So they started those attacks on the Ivies because they're the easiest targets. Well, for one, they're easy targets because they've got billionaire trustee friends there. They also have those elite universities are the subject of justified criticism because they've got tons of endowment money and few working class students. But billionaires were always going to attack public universities too, and we've seen that increasingly in the last year. So here's the war plan, which, you know, a lot of us think of the attacks on universities over the last year by the Trump administration. We think about them as coming from Trump himself, or, you know, if we're really kind of more insiders and we have more of a sense of what's going on, we think of it as coming from Christopher Rufo and people like him having some sort of grand design. But actually, these billionaires played quite a role. And so one way you can see this is Mark Andreessen gave a series of podcast interviews in 2023 and 2024 in which he talked about what he thought should be done to bring universities to heal. And so on January 26th, just as the Trump administration is coming in, he gives this interview on the Lex Fridman podcast, and he says, so the population at large is going to realize the corruption in universities, because we're going to tell them, and it's going to withdraw the funding. Universities are funded by 4 primary sources. Big ones is federal student loan program. Number 2 is research funding. Number 3 is tax exemption at the operating level. Number 4 is tax exemptions at the endowment level. If you withdraw those sources of federal money, state money, they all instantly go bankrupt, and then you can rebuild. Kind of sounds like a hostile takeover plan by a private equity hostile corporate raider. And in fact, Penny Pritzker, who is the chair of the board of Harvard, and is herself a private equity fund manager, but a more more center left type. She called the Trump plan, executing this plan as laid out by Mark Andreessen, as a hostile takeover. So they're bringing the language, the culture, the orientation of finance to this project. And then you've also got this thing, the Compact, which maybe some of you have heard about, brought to you by Mark Rowan, the president of Apollo. It has, the Compact itself, and Mark Rowan generally, like when he speaks to the media, has softer phrasing, but the phrasing really leaves open federal government enforcement to favor rich kids in admissions, to quash free speech, to purge billionaire critics at universities, and to replace faculty dedicated to science and truth with faculty who are more aligned with oligarchs and the rich. So where does this plan come from? Well, today's billionaires, as I said, they're a bit different than the 1980s folks, and there's a long story about it, but I'm just going to give you a taste of the kind of more recent story, which is that these folks have really been talking to each other. They are a club. There was recently a story in the Washington Post about these texts between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, about Mark Zuckerberg saying, "Hey, seems like your Doge stuff is going great. Let me know if I need to remove any people from Facebook because they're outing some of your Doge people who are firing really important federal employees and shutting down really valuable programs." Kind of like that, those secret texts that have just been come out. Mark Andreessen in 2020, during COVID in particular, started up all these private group chats for, and deliberately he asked one right-wing intellectual, he said, set up a group chat for me that has some really smart right-wing people. And they set up a whole series of them. They called some of them Chatham House, which refers to this British institution where you're not supposed to talk about what happens at Chatham House. It's like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but it's like the billionaire club where you can say everything that is offensive to people in the chat, so you don't worry about it. These chats were reported on by Ben Smith in Semaphore back about a year ago, and it was made up of big tech and right-wing intellectuals. This is one of the last chats for one of the groups where they had some kind of center-right people in the chat who were this guy Brian Goldberg, who is a Republican that supported Trump, and David Sachs, one of these tech right-wingers, himself a very wealthy guy, says this chat has become terrible. The loudest people have Trump derangement syndrome. Eric Torenberg, you should create another one with just smart people. Eric Torenberg works for Mark Andreessen, or did at the time at Andreessen Horowitz. And then David Sachs quits the group. Tucker Carlson leaves the group. Sean McGuire, who's another venture capital billionaire, leaves the group. Tyler Winklevoss of Facebook fame and of cryptocurrency fame quits the group. This is a list of some of the various members of these chat groups that have been reported on. So you got Palantir, Vivek Ramaswamy, some venture guys you might not know, and some right-wing intellectuals, and Larry Summers, whatever Larry Summers is, and David Shore, whatever David Shore is, and Christopher Rufo in that article by Ben Smith at Semaphore says, just says it yeah, I looked at these chats as a good investment of my time to radicalize tech elites who I thought were most likely and high impact new coalition partners for the far right. Here's some more things that Mark and Ben have said. They have a podcast for their venture capital firm called The Ben and Mark Show. And they say, we got a lot of friends at universities, people who are on the boards or who are presidents, endowment heads. Of course, endowment heads, because the endowments invest with the venture capital funds and the private equity funds. Alumni, professors. And why do they care? Ben Horowitz says, well, they're elite universities. They produce elites, and the elites end up running a lot of things. And they have some more florid quotes about how they really don't like the people who end up coming out of the university. According to Ben Smith, 2 participants said that Silicon Valley executives commiserated in the chats about how to handle employee demands, that they, for instance, declare that Black Lives Matter or support policies that they didn't actually believe in around transgender rights. And then also they see some economic threats from these from people in the university that they don't like. Andreessen thinks of the university as a policy think tank for the left, and he says that conservative faculty can't get hired. I don't know about you. I know plenty of conservative faculty at plenty of elite universities, and I'm glad they're there. I'm glad that we have that kind of debate. But I really like this one. So Andreessen goes on Joe Rogan just after Trump wins, and so this is Julia, during your tour of service at the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. He says, look, one of the reasons he thinks we've got to kill the universities is we've got this thing called the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. Elizabeth Warren, the law professor in chief's personal agency, that just gets to terrorize finance. The Biden administration tried to kill us. They tried to kill crypto, and they were on their way to trying to kill AI. The Federal Trade Commission was weaponized with its antitrust work. The Securities and Exchange Commission can investigate you. They can subpoena you, yada, yada, yada. So universities, bad. These guys are out for universities in general. So with all this said, and we can get more into this in the chat, and I'll end here, what's to be done about this and about our current moment? So one is, I think we got to focus on oligarchs as a shared enemy to freedom, education, and affordability in our society, on our campuses and beyond. And it's an enemy that a lot of people can relate to. It's a good starting point to understand what's going on. And we got to demand much, much more from politicians and from elite universities. The billionaires, one theory goes that part of why they've become so much more oligarchic is that they've amassed so much more wealth that they both have more resources to engage in politics, but also they feel like they've got more at stake. And there were plenty of Democratic politicians who supported policies that helped billionaires to amass that wealth. Similarly, elite universities have, piled their university boards full of these folks. And then the last thing, this is kind of my take on what the university should be. And I like bringing this idea to Jubilee School because I see Jubilee School as a nice kind of manifestation of this, but I think we can get our universities as formal organizations to do it as well. We got to make universities open spaces of community life. And it's not just college for all, for people to come and do 4-year degrees. Maddie from Debt Collective yesterday was, talking to me about this and was asking about college for all. And I said, yeah, that's good. But I got some of my best friends went to trade school and they got a lot out of trade school and it's great. But those folks, retirees, they should all be part of the university community too. We should provide affordable housing, free performances, and community social life on university campuses. Stanford University has a campus of 8,000 acres in the San Francisco Bay Area where nobody can afford housing. What if we built a bunch of housing and it was mixed use affordable housing for people on the Stanford campus? And one of my favorite college experiences, most memorable, is discovering Black Eyed Peas by going to a free Black Eyed Peas concert in the late 90s at the UC Santa Cruz campus where I wasn't even a student. We should have more of that kind of life on campuses. They should be porous and open spaces that belong to everyone. And so making them that rather than the playgrounds of billionaires and their children, I think is part of what I see us imagining universities as. So I'll stop there. I don't know how long I went. I just kind of went,
So
and I'll
good.
pull down the slides if that's okay.
Yeah, it would be great because then we can have a conversation where we see each other. Charlie, that was amazing. Super, super tight, man. Super tight. Julia, do you want to ask your first question? And then what we'll do is we'll open it up for other folks in the room to ask some questions. And again, we can ask questions about anything that Charlie presented. Sorry, there's some dogs going crazy. Anything that Charlie presented and or like some tactics. We got into the what is to be done at the bottom there of the presentation. So anything around analysis and or tactics is free game. Julia, do you want to start us off?
I'm honored by that. Well, I think I've talked to you about this before, Charlie, but at the end of my time at CFPB, I was really looking into the private equity involvement in tuition pricing. Um, have you been working on that at all? I'm like fascinated by it, and I feel like
No, I haven't. I mean, I know about the concept of discriminatory pricing, and I know how private equity is an architect of it, and I think that is actually a great case study for thinking about how big tech, and finance work together because they're
yeah.
using, a great application of AI models, for example, in the view of big tech and finances to like carry out discriminatory pricing where you can wring the highest
hmm
prices out of people,
hmm
instead of having more transparent information about pricing so that people can make good choices and a market can work in the context where markets work well for some things. Like, let a market work well. It's
hmm
also great because it's very anti-market and it shows how
hmm
the whole mythology of the free market
Yeah.
is just that it's a mythology. As Peter Thiel, another person in this milieu says, competition is for losers.
hmm
And so he doesn't want his companies competing on prices to get consumers. And that's a great example. I have not studied the exact case of that kind of pricing, discriminatory pricing in higher education. Where you use big data, you purchase data on people and all their digital footprint. If you want an academic work for kind of understanding that world of big data, I highly recommend The Ordinal Society by Marion Fourcade, who was just here. I think maybe I've got her. It's over there. I won't grab it. Marion Fourcade, great book. She just was here at UC Merced to give a talk, and she's at UC Berkeley, and an economic sociologist. But yeah, I encourage people, go
Thank you.
forth and prosecute the war on discriminatory pricing. I think it's a great one, not just because it matters for students, but it shows how they do this thing broadly across the economy. And it's another way where when we challenge the worst of private equity and big tech in higher education, it provides a model for challenging it in the larger economy.
Yes, thank you so much. And for those who don't know, it's basically like private equity has rolled up all of these sources of data. They own all of the sources of data, including like the College Board or scholarships.com or whatever software every high school student has to use to apply to all the colleges. And then they, in another business that they own, make deals directly with 98% of American colleges to use that data, combine it with FAFSA, and figure out discriminatory pricing for higher education.
Yeah, I
So
wonder if
it's pretty
Ozan
bad.
has Ozan Jaquette worked on that at
Yes,
UCLA. So he's a friend
yes.
and he's great. So
Yes,
that's
we're fans.
Ozan is, yeah, he's on the case, and
He's on the case.
he is as good a quantitative methodologist and data scientist as you could get to go after that. So it's awesome that he's working on that.
Julia, I wonder, and then we'll go to AW for a question. Amy, oh shit, sorry, AW. But Julia, is if you have a question around power, if there's a way that you guys map that out, maybe at some point we make that public, like a map of like who the players are. Because
Totally.
just listening to you and Charlie talk. it would be really helpful, I think, for people to see like who's doing what in terms of the discriminatory pricing. So if there's something available, let's make that public.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, yes, and FYI, just since we have some university governance people here, 98% of schools are doing it. So there are private equity players that we can map out, but almost every school, almost, any s- school board of trustees could look into that or get data about it and see the effect it's having.
All right, so we got AW and then we got Bruce. Go for it, AW.
Thanks so much for that, yeah, for that short but effective talk, Charlie. I had a question about, so a lot of the story you've told us today is about what's happening today and what kind of, I guess, future we can expect from higher ed out of that. But I'm wondering if you could set the scene for like where that story comes from. So like at the very start of the period that you're studying most intensively, like what are the conditions that make all this possible? For instance, like does it come out of the like sort of the old money trustee system that was common like through the 50s and so on, or is there some other dynamic that really gives rise to, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Great question. Thank you. Well, you should buy my book, Bankers in the Ivory Tower. You can buy it directly from a nonprofit press, University of Chicago Press. Um, but yeah, I mean, university boards have always been dominated by elites. A confession: my great grandfather was kind of industrialist investment banker and was on the board of University of Chicago. So he was a banker in the Ivory Tower back in the, I believe, late 1930s. He was a bit of an odd duck. He was also investigated by J. Edgar Hoover because he was a prominent critic of the Cold War. So yeah, long tradition of universities being governed by elites and for elites. C. Wright Mills, you go back and you read C. Wright Mills in the 1950s and the power elite. The role of elite colleges in constructing the tight elite networks of the power elite has always been there. And and the centrality of finance has always been there in the U.S. case. Finance is a system that allocates resources across society. And the way finance works, the way they try to make money is they try to have private knowledge about what's going on in the economy, from the corporate level to the individual level. And then they try to use that money to allocate debt and allocate investment capital in places where they think it'll make the highest return. So it's really helpful for them to have what Mark Mizrachi calls cognitive range, like a view of the entire economy, but also insider connections. Perhaps the kind of insider connections that are being used to make big bets on oil futures right now, as oil prices fluctuate because of the Iran war. Investing in shorting oil 70 minutes before Donald Trump announces that he's going to that he thinks that they're on the brink of a breakthrough to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and so you make this bet on oil because you've got insider knowledge that Trump's about to make that investment. And who are the kinds of people who make those bets? Well, those are hedge fund traders who do those kinds of bets. So universities have always been important for constructing the financial elite and the elite of the country. They create, an elite is by definition an exclusive group. So elite universities and their excluding are important. But something does change in the 1980s, and it's what we nerds call financialization, which is, a few things happen. One is that you get a deregulation of finance where there's a whole kind of policy maze of how it works, but we deregulate the extent to which capital can flow between different actors and be invested. We deregulate the extent to which investors can use debt to make investments. And that, together with new investment techniques like private equity and hedge fund investment, leads to the explosion of these huge fortunes. And as you get more private equity and hedge fund billionaires and then tech billionaires, the university boards like people who will donate. So they like to have rich people come on. And then the other thing I've shown is, as I was talking about, the financiers like to be on the boards too, because they get these private connections that are valuable to them, both socially valuable but economically valuable to them. And then the other thing that supercharges, the particular structure of our higher ed system is the expansion of federal student loans, which you can think of as part of that financialization idea. Instead of funding higher ed by tax and spending and funding Pell Grants, where they covered most of the cost of college for most students in the 1970s, you say, and particularly around 1992 through a series of reforms by the Bush and Clinton administrations, we're mostly going to finance higher education with loans. And we're going to create this game of chasing loan revenue. So that's sort of some of the deeper history. And I'll pause there because that was kind of a long answer. My current book project, Axis of Oligarchy, is more about, how do we trace the origins of the rise of big tech and financiers in politics. And that's a parallel but somewhat different story.
Thanks, Charlie. Bruce is next. I did want to say, though, that Constance is on the call, and Constance and Tim Kaufman-Osborne are doing a talk that's pretty related to this on July 9th for Jubilee School around governing boards. So,
Great.
yeah, really glad you could make it, Constance. Bruce, you're up.
Cool. I was just writing down that date. I'd love to attend. I was going to bring up Tim Kaufman-Osborne's work too, but actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I put in the chat, which is based on what I learned at an event that was sponsored by Higher Ed Labor United, Labor at Wayne, this new group, Public Good U, that I'm part of, on public budgets, public good. And I learned a lot from this guy, Justin Flores, who looks at private equity in terms of endowments and pension funds that are investing and helping create the capital that, well, paying for it, paying into the private equity funds that then claim they're going to make these big profits, which then go back into the endowments, right? So that's another avenue. What was interesting about that conversation, though, Matt Siebold, who you may know through the American Vandal podcast, he does a lot on higher ed and economics as well. He was talking with Justin about how the window for private equity to say we'll get your return is expanding. It used to be like a 3 to 5 year window. Maybe now it's 4 to 7. Maybe now it's approaching 10. They're having a tougher time getting the investment in the first place and then extracting the profits. So I'm wondering if there are some cracks in the armor there and any
Yeah.
openings to maybe get different kinds of board members, especially on these elite boards.
Yeah, a couple things there. I'm going to have a paper out in the next couple months with the Roosevelt Institute titled How Private Equity Owns America. And it's about the expansion of private equity over the last 40 years into all corners of the economy, and how it's particularly now has expanded through what we call Main Street invading, and monopoly building and shadow ownership. And shadow ownership is related to the latter thing that you say. They hold on to their investments much longer. So it's now a 7-year average time before they liquidate their funds. And I think there's some uncertainty about how much, why is it that they take longer? They do still tend to make higher returns in the long run. Though the equity markets and tech stocks have done so well recently that it's hard to say. But here's I think one of the upshots for universities, which is, the irony here is that Mark Andreessen and Mark Rowan, private equity and venture capital guys who have attacked universities, have made private equity investment with their firms make less sense. Because if you can't get the capital out of your private equity investment without without paying a penalty, which is how it works. If you're an endowment and you need to get some money out without taking a penalty, then you really don't want to invest with private equity in a context where you might have $1 billion funding cut because Mark Rowan and Mark Andreessen want to, in their words, cut all the federal funding to you to make you go bankrupt so that you can rebuild. So if you've got an endowment and they're going to liquidate you and you need the endowment, I wrote a piece about this a year ago in the New York Times titled $15 billion is enough to fight the president. 15 billion is a reference to the size of the Columbia endowment. You really don't want to have your 15 billion at Columbia or your 40 billion at the UC system all locked up with Apollo, which is where UC has heavy investments with Apollo. And there's a fantastic campaign founded by Hannah Appel of the Debt Collective, of your peers, one of the Debt Collective founders at UC, called Move Your Money. And I just moved my money last week. I had to go into my own, I mostly have a pension because we've got pensions at UC, but we also have voluntary accounts like a 401k. So I Zoomed with Hannah because I needed her to show me how to move my money and say I want my money to go to the environmental and sustainable funds, which have been doing great. And they've got a great strategy for this campaign, which is let's move the voluntary money that we can and show how many people want it. Let's get 10% of faculty to move it, which 10% of faculty in the UC system is like thousands of faculty. And then we'll go to this chief investment officer and we'll go with our unions and we'll say, we want the pension money moved too. No more paying Mark Rowan to try to liquidate our universities and crush free speech.
So I'm just going to say how cool Jubilee School is because we also got Hannah doing a Jubilee School session on that campaign June 4th. So
I'm in the right place, clearly.
you are man, you and everyone
honored to be in this roster.
It's a badass roster, I gotta say, y'all. And we got
The
like
roster
great
is stacked. I will admit the roster is super stacked.
and so is the audience. So we get really great people like the people on this call coming to listen in and ask questions. Does anyone else have a question? I wanted to ask one question if no one else has a question, just for a conversation between all of us, actually. But I want to
I
pause
have
to
a
see.
very boring technical one. Can I ask it and then we go to the one for everyone?
Go for it.
Sorry. Charlie, I know one issue that I've had for a long time as a researcher is like getting the private equity information because obviously they hoard the information and don't give it. How are you tracking the information and do you have any good sources? Maybe that's the Justin Flores thing that we were just talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what facet of the data that you want to track.
I was like interested in what you just said about UC's investments. Like, do you know that because you work there?
I know that because Hannah told me. And, there's people within the university who pay attention to what we do. In some ways, the public data has actually gotten worse. There used to be, because the private equity companies are really secretive, and that's the shadow ownership metaphor, and this forthcoming paper relates to that. If you look at there's a thing called the NACUBO, National Association of College and University Business Officers. They publish an annual endowment report. Until like 10 years ago, they would list every investment fund that survey participants had invested in. So you could go back, and that's why I know that when Providence Equity Capital and Goldman Sachs bought EDMC, the predatory for-profit college, in the largest buyout in for-profit college history in 2006. It was like a $3.4 billion buyout. They had capital from 14 different endowments. And I know that because, at least 14 endowments. I know that because the endowments listed the funds that were involved in the buyout in the NACUBO survey responses. And those are all published and something that you can get in a lot of libraries. But the data is worse. And so for knowing who your university is invested in, you can go public university by public university. And because of public disclosure requirements, you have to know a lot. But the private equity people are are very secretive.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm going to ask this question of Charlie, but I also want to ask it for the people in the audience because I know a lot of people in this audience have much to say on this, and it'd be great to hear your thoughts. So, when I heard you talking again, and I've read the book, and you and I have been able to talk. This notion of shared governance came to mind once more. This is a very contentious issue right now in higher education. A lot of people talk about it. Many people rely on it. Constance and Tim have a great critique of the idea writ large and why we need to like maybe move to something else and rethink this entirely. Um, but what does this billionaire control and or attempt to influence, destruct, and remake have to say about the notion of shared governance? And particularly like if we want a new college system, one that you kind of started to map out and that we're talking about with the College for All series, what do we got to do to rethink the way that universities are governed? Who would be doing the governing? How would we make up that board? And maybe also, how do we keep these folks just completely marginalized? So, open floor, but Charlie, if you want to say a couple things on that.
Yeah, I mean, it might help. I'm curious what Constance has to say because she's done the work, much more of the work than I have. But the it might be helpful to think about. So, where does university governance come from? And so, our Harvard is the oldest corporation in the U.S. It's a kind of interesting fact about Harvard. So it's a very early organizational form, and corporation. It's like corporation comes from corpus. It's like a body, but in a lot of ways, universities in the olden times, as I understand it, this is not really my area of expertise, but they were kind of guilds, right? Where in order to get into the guild as an exclusive club of people who early in universities, there was a religious and clerical orientation of many universities. To get into the guild, you got to be accepted by that elite that has access to divine knowledge and later to knowledge derived from science and from uh, critical reasoning. Um, and So you had the members of the guild control who gets in and who gets out. And I think we sometimes romanticize that in the universities. There are absolutely there's absolutely value uh, in peer review, in um, the practitioners, doing the licensing and certifying of who does this instead of some external powerful actor. But it also really is a form of social closure. And so, if you start from what was good about the sort of guild-like governance of old universities, and how are the problems of social closure made the institutions vulnerable to what they've become, including to some of the attacks that the billionaires are levying against universities, right? Like to say that Harvard is a socially closed place is a legit criticism, and so that's where this, me talking about the importance of openness, and the university being a community and a space for everyone, that does many things, a multiversity, as Clark Kerr said, um, uh, for many people. But I'll stop there. I don't know if Constance wants to chime in. Just saw she chatted something.
Yeah, Constance, do you want to say something? Or no pressure, but if you want to come off of mute. We can't hear you though, Constance. Take yourself off mute, my friend.
Hi, y'all. Sorry to be late. Just got out of class, and thank you for the shout out. I mean, this sounded so rich. I wish I'd been here for all of it. But it is true.
Constance, can just one second, my friend. Can you maybe speak a little closer to the mic? It's a little bit hard to hear you.
Okay, it's
That's better.
right here and it's on.
That's better too.
Oh, okay. I do want to shout out to Tim Cox. It's literally right on how in the world.
Constance, can you go closer to the mic again? Sorry, we got the shout out to Tim.
Hey, I'm sorry. Let me just try to.
Stay right there, my friend. Go for it.
Okay. I'm just
Yep,
sorry. I don't want to spend too much time on this. My audio is on all the way.
you're good now. Go for it.
Okay. So you can hear me now?
Oh yeah, that's great.
Okay, great. Well, uh, yeah, so Tim did write the book, literally wrote the book on how in the world uh, our university ruled by, ruled by, I'm holding it up to my face now, ruled by what a bunch of unelected speakers, largely drawn from the finance.
Constance, we're missing it. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on. Maybe you can type a couple bullet points in the chat.
I already did.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
We're it just fades in and out. I don't know what, but we got Tim. We got that part. And maybe we can try that in a second. While we wait for that, there's one thing that you said, Charlie, that I think has really huge implications about an open university, and this is a question again for the audience. It would, I think, imply then that we have to figure out a way to organize people outside the university towards this project. And that seems like a daunting task. I don't know if anyone's got anything to say about that. Audrey, you said yes. What do you give us something, Audrey?
I mean, that's the problem. I don't think like there's anything to give. I'm so sorry for being so down about it. I mean, if it was, I have an experience of being at the university in Germany, and I know that the German system has also changed since I was last there 20 years ago, but it's just a completely different higher ed system. And as Charlie, elucidated, it's so financialized, and there was social closure before. So the people that I talk to, I'm canvassing now. I'm knocking on doors and talking to regular everyday people. I mean, the university is the last thing on their mind. I mean, that's, there's some subjective, conjecture in there, but all I can do is underline what you just said, Jason. It's just hugely daunting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at community colleges are quite a model, right? And I did think community college governance, which tends to be more tied to a local polity, is interesting. There's not, plenty of problems at community colleges, but I kind of think about this like, you can't do everything, but like, what if there's one big thing that could provide an example, and a model for this? And so, the housing, and housing affordability, which is like a thing that everybody's talking about. And yeah, we might not have a bunch of loose money. We certainly don't have a bunch of loose money rattling around at UC Merced. We do have a lot of land at UC Merced. And what if the state decided it was going to capitalize building housing on our campus, not just for students? And what if, Tom Steyer does turn out to be a billionaire against oligarchy? He's actually done some great stuff to support our student debt work in California. And so, if I get an audience with Tom Steyer, I'll say, hey, you're a Stanford alum, right? What if you use the power of the governorship to say, Stanford needs to put up some money for affordable housing for people in the Bay Area on that 8,000 acre campus, and you've got a $40 billion endowment to chip in, and maybe we use some state bond borrowing to build some affordable housing, to address the thing that is literally the number one issue to every California. So our universities have quite a bit of resources, including untapped resources, in part because they're the resources are held hostage by those who control the universities.
And Audrey, do you want to say your comment, and then we'll go to Eaton, right? No, I always mispronounce it. Oh man, I always screw this up, even though I've met you like a billion times. Audrey, do you want to say your comment out loud, and then we'll move to, and then after that, Bruce as well.
Sure. I mean, the community college topic is interesting. I think it's everything's so multifaceted. It's hard to kind of hone down on something. I mean, it's also a mess because if you know about community colleges, you know about dual enrollment, and then it pulls in the entire high school system, and the public education system. So, but I do think this article that I sent to Jason the other day, which is about the students who are in debt, who actually want to go to the university, and how they they don't have access to what you're presenting here. I barely have access to what, I mean, I can educate myself and that's fine, but somehow this knowledge that, private equity doesn't want open is also, it's not getting to the university itself, which is supposed to be an intellectual institution, whatever that means.
All right.
Okay, so it's Edna,
Edna, thank you.
but it's, as I always say, it's okay that it's really hard to remember how to pronounce it because it's not spelled phonetically.
I'm so sorry.
No, don't apologize. We can blame the processor on Ellis Island who gave my grandmother that spelling, even though she was Slavic and not Irish, Welsh, or Gaelic. Anyway, I'm thinking about a couple of things, Charlie, when you were talking about how Harvard is the oldest corporation. I really appreciate what you said, tying it back to the sort of early guild system, but also I'm thinking about I have my students do a project on corporate personhood, and they read a lot of the stuff produced by POCLAD prior to the founding of like Move to Amend or Reclaim Democracy. And there's this timeline of corporate personhood, how corporations have gained personhood status through the Constitution and through Supreme Court fiat. And one of the things that they say in that early research is that the Constitution itself is an anti-corporatist charter. And so thinking about like how incorporation was a technique used by the crown heads of Europe to plunder the riches of the New World and other places around the globe, I'm struck by this contradiction, it seems, in the university, especially I'm at the CSU, you're at the UC, you're talking about California community colleges, all these public institutions, and they're supposed to be public education institutions. And I think, and I also hear the sort of the caution about how for a lot of Americans, university is not on their minds. That makes perfect sense that it's not. But public education should be on all of our minds. So it seems like one of the things in thinking about what are other alternate visions for governing the university? How does the cause of the university and how does our cause fare in relationship to struggles to support and continue to maintain a public education, if that's what people want to do? And to me, this seems really important, based on the things you were presenting, Charlie, and I missed part of it because I had to run late as well. Our campus is getting hacked.
Yes. Yeah, I heard about this. Canvas. Big tech.
Canvas is down at Poly and at Allen Hancock Community College and all over the place. But it's kind of funny. But I just I'm thinking about, I've not been at CSU for very long, but one of the things I hear a lot of people in the CFA talk about is how the CSU used to be the People's University, but we've lost no one ever talks about it as a People's University anymore. And I'm like, I think we need to go back to like the idea of a People's University, the Open University. But how do we do that in an ecosystem that is centered around having to have massive amounts of money and privatizing everything? And this sort of plutocratic oligarchy who has absconded with everything. Anyway, that's it for now. I can talk about this forever.
Well, your class sounds great. I wish I could take it. Um, yeah, the emergence of corporate personhood and the Constitution as an anti-corporatist charter is really interesting. And I've got a paper with Mitchell Stevens called Universities as Peculiar Organizations. And we talk about how universities are quasi sovereign. And and I think it relates to that, right? Like the tradition of incorporating as a way to establish yourself as quasi sovereign, apart from and not to be governed by society or the polity. And I think as we're discovering with Donald Trump, there are a lot of reasons why you do want to be sovereign. Or in California, you see the University of California always uses the language of autonomous to say we need to be autonomous from the state, which, you know, wasn't bad to be able to declare autonomy from the state when Ronald Reagan was running, you know, the Trump 1.0 version of the attacks on the university that we've seen. But that autonomy from society can really be an Achilles heel if you are not connected to the needs and the needs and the sociality of everyday people. And you know, CSU is not autonomous, and in some ways, you know, CSU as a unionized university that also has relatively strong shared governance, I think structurally isn't as is structurally in a relatively good place. One of the problems is we've just had a terrible governor for a long time, appointing terrible board members. And so, you know, you and CFA need to get some meetings with our potential new billionaire in chief, Tom Steyer, about like who are we appointing to the CSU Board of Trustees, and how do we empower communities and appoint community leaders and people from a range of backgrounds to the board.
That's a great segue into some of what Constance wrote in the chat. And I think I'm going to use Constance, your chat comment, to hype up your presentation with Tim on July 9th, which is going to be fire. So please do consider showing up to that session at Jubilee School, and definitely tell other people, because that's gonna be good. Go for it, Constance, and then we'll go with Bruce and we'll start to wrap things up.
Hear me now? No?
Yes and no.
Hey, I just changed it over, but
You're good.
just changed it over. And all I wanted to say in terms of practical activities that we're trying to do to redo democratic rule of the earth, that we have created a template for everyone to use. Easy, plug in, tell you exactly where to get the information. Plug in your regents, the boards of governors, visitors, whatever, the regents, how they got there, to put them on the board, what their backgrounds are in detail, and what are their possible conflicts. And as we gather them, we are going to do something like hold mock tribunals, no public trial, about a mock trial or tribunal of rules.
So Constance, you faded a little bit there, but I just can pick up on this. So Constance is part of the Coalition of Action in Higher Education, which I'm also a part of. So is Dr. Shamel Bell. And there's a caucus within that created this template that Constance is referring to. And if you could share it, Constance, it's really an amazing tool where you can you can do like collective research into who's on the board, what do they do, what are conflicts of interest. Really a fantastic thing for all of us to put to use. And we'll hear more about it on the 9th. So if you could post that, Constance, that would be great, because there might be some people here that can get rolling on that right away. We'll go with Bruce with a short comment or question. Charlie, last word, and then we'll wrap up with a preview of what's to come on Jubilee School. So, Bruce, short word, then Charlie, and we'll wrap up.
Cool. I mean, just such a productive discussion. It's pulling together a lot of thoughts for me, and I'm just going to rattle off a few things. Charlie's housing idea is being tried right now at SUNY Purchase, which
Hmm.
you may know it's in Westchester County. There's
Yeah.
like a senior living learning community with
Awesome.
housing built on campus. Remains to be seen. How it turns out. Some of the students were concerned that it would attract MAGA voters, and it's a very liberal place where the police came in and busted a pro-Palestinian protest, which led to the president going um,
Hmm.
a few months later. But you know, I would think that it would be most likely to attract, former professors and, people who want, former teachers, people who want to continue to be self-educating themselves even in retirement. So we'll see how that plays out. And it is a model that can be extended to a lot of public institutions. One of the things that I'm also hearing, though, thinking about California, New York, Michigan, which is where the public budget's public good symposium happened, it- this is not just a right-left thing. Like this is a battle within the Democratic Party, and there are a lot of wealthy plutocrats in the Democratic Party who want to big tech and finance and hedge funds and private equity to continue running things, um, to the tune of investing institutional debt in big data, AI data centers, this Blue Dot initiative in Michigan, um, to battles over shared governance. I'll say within the SUNY system, it's still our guiding framework, but trying to flesh out just what does it mean, and even if it's only advisory, how to get the advice heard, listened to, taken seriously is an ongoing conversation between, myself and members of the system, leadership, and the board, as well as Candace Vason, who's the president of the Faculty Council of Community Colleges, where there are, 30 different community colleges with 30 different local boards, many in red counties. So we may think of New York as a blue state, but when you get that multi-tiered governance framework, the Republican candidate is from Nassau County, um, for governor of New York. And, he's pro-ICE on campus. He hasn't yet
Yeah.
done it, but rhetorically, he's saying things like that. So, there's just so much to dive into with kind of trying to realize the promise of public good you, realize the promise of shared governance, at least hold people to the regulative ideals and the principles and the values supposedly in those concepts, even as we're seeing in many states, including many blue states, it kind of being hollowed out.
Thanks for that recap, Bruce. And before we go to Charlie for the last word, I do want to note that Constance put in the chat this Know Your Governing Board template that Constance and Tim will talk more about on the 9th. But just check it out when you get a chance. Share with your friends on campus. It's a really good participatory exercise to build power, to build knowledge on your campus with a variety of people, students, faculty, staff, you name it. Anybody can do this work and they'll walk you through that work eventually. So thank you for that, Constance. Charlie, last word, my friend.
Just grateful for the opportunity to talk with you all. I'm a big fan of Debt Collective and how it brings people together from different parts of the university and beyond to talk about imagining a better world within the many constraints and headwinds that we're facing. And but I get to learn great stuff. I love what I just learned about the SUNY Purchase. My brother-in-law lives in Westchester, so when I visit him this summer, I'm going to go by to see this senior living facility and send me the reports about that, Bruce. But but yeah, grateful to meet everyone and hear about the work that you're all doing.
And so grateful for you. What we are trying to do is build this network out across the country to share these ideas, share these tactics, and eventually build some power. And along that line, I just want to add one last plug for the upcoming Jubilee schools. We got Marshall Steinbaum, who wrote a white paper for Higher Education Labor United, coming up next, May 21st. We got Constance and Tim on shared governance, sorry, not shared governance, Know Your Governing Board. it's a critique. We got Max Page from Massachusetts Teacher Association going to talk about the millionaire tax in Massachusetts that really changed the dynamics there. We got Hannah Appel and Move Your Money. We got all sorts of good stuff. Please join us. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. And once more, thank you, Charlie.
Wait,
That
can
was
I
awesome.
just say a couple words before we get off? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, please.
Okay. I just wanted to say a couple things based on our conversation. And first of all, we do have a link where you can just sign up for all future Jubilee schools, which means you could get the recordings or recaps. So I put that in the chat if you want to do that. And I also put a cute little flyer for all upcoming Jubilee schools in the chat if you want to look at that. And I do feel like we have organically reached this place of moving into solutions. And that's where we're going with Jubilee School. So we tried to have the first half be like a diagnosis of the problems we face, and the second half be kind of moving towards practice. So the first session is next time with Marshall Steinbaum, and he did write with Helu this Rebuilding American Higher Ed kind of platform that touches on a lot of the things we've been talking about tonight. So we're gonna start with that next time and then go forward and have these sessions that we've been referencing all night, like Constance's session about the governing boards, a session with Hannah about divesting, Move Your Money campaign at UC, which does sound amazing. We're gonna have a session with like Hill staffers about how to win the College for All fight, like trying to move into some real tactics conversations. So I do hope you will join us. And just since I have you, I just want to quickly say there is some action going on right now at the federal level with President Trump trying to claw back one type of student debt cancellation, public service loan forgiveness, based on like to whoever he wants, kind of. It's like um, the administration could just deem an organization like a threat, and then nobody who works there could get PSLF. So, for example, you could say, I don't like that New York City is a sanctuary city. Anyone who works in New York City, no more PSLF. So, there is an effort in the Senate right now to undo that rule. And we're trying to just mobilize our members to email their senators to get the senators to confirm that they will vote to protect PSLF. So anyway, just wanted to link to that. We have a very easy form. You could do it in 2 minutes. Please do that. And we are also trying to build up an organizing infrastructure to fight for College for All, which is a longer term goal. But if anyone wants to join us, we are working on all the issues we've discussed tonight. And I have a little signal chat I can drop that you can join, where currently we're just trying to get in a good formation to be able to approach our legislators.
And there you have it. Onwards to
Onwards.
victory.
And do read Charlie's book. It really truly has been very influential to me as well.
Absolutely.
And
Thank
if you want to see Charlie's conversation with Maddie, sorry, last thing I'll say, I'll drop that link in the chat one more time, which I thought was like Maddie, as always, extremely like accessible conversations about the issues we care about. So
The existing debt.
be careful opening it because it immediately starts going. But there you go. And you can sign up for Charlie's Substack, which I also read and like. I think at the link that he just dropped in the chat.